What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Just got out of seeing Smile 2, and I'm ready to offer my spoiler-free review, although I'll have one very mild spoiler toward the end of the video, but I'll include a time code as well as a verbal warning before doing that. But let's not bury the lead. Smile 2 is a very enjoyable evening at the movies, or maybe enjoyable is the wrong word, a very thrilling evening at the movies. I don't think I'd go so far as to describe it as either scary or disturbing, but it is definitely thrilling and exciting. There's one jump scare, and usually I don't like jump scares. Usually I look down upon movies for having jump scares, but there's one jump scare that is so effective and so abrupt and so terrifying. I recoiled with both of my legs at the same time, where I ended up giving myself leg cramps behind both of my thighs. So I was trying to massage my thighs and stretch out while still paying attention to what was going on the screen. But that's what we're paying for when we go to see a movie within the horror genre. We want thrills and excitement. And while I prefer movies to be creepy and eerie and kind of slowly but surely kind of crawl up your leg, I'll take a really effective jump scare when they work, because sometimes I feel like filmmakers use them as a crutch, as a substitute for talent or ability. But now that we've got 2 movies under the belt of filmmaker, hang on one sec, I've got his name written down, Parker Finn. I think it's safe to say the first Smile was not a fluke. Prior to Smile, he had written and directed 2 short films, and then Smile became this unexpected smash when it came out, because Parker Finn based that movie on an earlier short film called Laura Hasn't Slept. But on a budget of $17 million, the first Smile grossed $217.4 million. That's insane. When people ask themselves, how come so many horror movies get made these days? Well, they look at a movie like Smile, maybe I can replicate some of that success. I mean, those are some crazy fucking numbers. I would argue that Smile 2 is the better made movie. I think the production value is better. I think the central character is more interesting. I think the overall just setting and environment is much more kind of thrilling and deranged. The world of pop culture and pop stars is already pretty insane to begin with. And then you add this strange demonic curse. It gets all the more interesting. I don't know if Smile 2 will replicate that level of success, because they've already kind of revealed their bag of tricks. If you like the first Smile, or if you love the first Smile, or you were petrified by the first Smile, Smile 2 is not going to have a ton of surprises, although that hasn't stopped the Quiet Place movies from enjoying success one movie after another. But I think the real difference with this movie for me was actress Naomi Scott. I had never seen her in anything before. I didn't see Aladdin. I didn't see Charlie's Angels. So this was the first time she popped up on my radar, and she fucking nails it. She's that rare actress where you can describe her as a triple threat. And I remember watching an interview with John Travolta years ago talking about how every actor of his generation wanted to be a triple threat, meaning that you can act, you can sing, and you can dance. And if you're going to play a pop star at the center of this big horror extravaganza, well then you're going to be called upon to act, to sing, to dance, and do them all convincingly, in addition to going stark raving nuts and insane and crying and weeping and screaming at all the imagined horrors that are emerging due to this demonic infection that is plaguing the central character. And she sells it. Some actors can look off into a corner where nothing's there, and maybe they'll come close to selling you on the idea of seeing something truly terrifying. Naomi Scott's eyes are just so expressive, and yeah, she's got some real chops. So once again, I'd never seen her before this, but I'll be paying attention to Naomi Scott from here on out. And another aspect of this movie I enjoyed is how Smile 2 picks up right where the last one left off, or a few days later. It picks up with Kyle Gallner's character. Kyle Gallner was fantastic earlier this summer in the movie Strange Darling, but he's good in the Smile movies as well. I think he's better in Strange Darling, but if you like that first movie, it's boom, it doesn't miss a beat. Smile 2 just assumes that you've seen the first movie and that you like it and that you're ready to rock and you're ready to go on this roller coaster ride one more time. But what's interesting this time around is merging the insanity of the private life of a pop culture or pop star diva with the world of horror. And obviously that worked very well in the first one, combining a hospital with the Smile virus, or whatever you want to call it, the Smile infection, the Smile spirit, whatever the case might be. But in the context of this movie, this is a world where pop stars do a lot of drugs, and they drink, and they get in car wrecks, and they have a lot of self-destructive, bordering on kind of violent, suicidal behavior, oftentimes which has a negative impact on those people around them. And so people are quite literally wearing the scars from their past behavior. And so as things start to go a little insane, everybody just assumes, oh, well, you must be taking drugs, or you must have fallen off the wagon, blah, blah, blah. So it's the two worlds come together very, very well. And also I like how the character played by Naomi Scott, she's not some little angel or some perfect character who's incapable of doing wrong and knows the answers to all of her problems. She's got deep character flaws and personality flaws, and she just leans into them. And actress Naomi Scott, I guess one of the the triumphs on her part is that we still love and adore the character, even though, as a pop star, she's guilty of some, let's just say, selfish behavior, to put it mildly. But I guess she's surrounded by like a den of sharks or like a pit of vipers where everybody's trying to like get their piece of the action and bleed her dry, from her mother to her assistants to other celebrities seeking like her participation in all the various causes and that sort of thing. Like, she's already breaking under the weight of all the stresses and concerns of trying to mount a comeback after this horrible car wreck that she was involved in. And I just like how this is that one little thing that pushes her right over the edge. But she was all ready to go right over the edge to begin with. But Naomi Scott, she's charismatic enough, we're with her on her side every step of the way. And along those lines, when it comes to the depiction of the world surrounding this giant pop star diva character, I like how the fans aren't spared as well. Like, usually people, they try to act like, oh, well, the fans are just kind of like soft and fuzzy little, like, little bunny rabbits, and they just want to be entertained and blah, blah, blah. What's interesting with this movie is that because the fans are so intense in their fervor and they're kind of like so psychotic for the star, it's tough to know when one's just being fucking weird or if one's like smiling due to being afflicted by, or I guess like, is it an illusion being projected by this demonic supernatural entity, or is it actually just a fucking deranged fan? Some fans of just like pop stars in general might, push back on that negative portrayal. But I feel like if a movie's going to start throwing some daggers, I feel like whether you're talking about the star herself, her management team, her collaborators, or her dancers, or her entire team, or the fans that greedily kind of watch all the shows, I just thought it was interesting that this movie it was kind of an unflinching portrayal of just how negative and psychotic and draining this whole world can be once things kind of start to spiral out of control. But as far as the supernatural smile gimmick is concerned, it might have diminishing returns over time. I don't know if they'll be able to squeeze like a third, fourth, or fifth smile out of this franchise without trying to evolve the story in some way. But if you evolve the story too much and give too many answers, it might just fall to pieces. But I guess the director feels like if he gives you enough gore and enough surprises and enough just like raw, pure violence, that'll help kind of, sustain your interest. And I'd say on the whole, I mean, one of the earliest kind of smile suicides we see, you're like, woo, okay, like you went there. And I feel like right now in the world of entertainment, there are far too many movies that rely upon like digital blood spray where it just looks like super fake and really artificial and kind of takes you out of the movie. There's a little bit of that in the Smile too, but I'd say on the whole, the gore and the blood and all that stuff is pretty convincing. What I suspect is that they're probably using practical effects than enhancing them in a digital fashion. But on the whole, I have to say the gore was pretty shocking. And there were a few curveballs which I did not see coming, because obviously what the Smile plague likes to do is kind of like lure you into a false sense of security, making you think that you're spending time with one of your trusted friends or loved ones. And then you look over at them and they're like, and they're smiling, giving you the heebie-jeebies and that sort of thing, driving you insane. But I don't know if this style of horror or scary movie lends itself to repeat viewings the way that a movie like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist or Night of the Living Dead, like, any major classic you care to mention, like the really good horror movies of the past, you end up watching them if you're a horror freak, 5, 10, 15, 20 times. Like Evil Dead, I have no idea how many times I've seen Evil Dead. Plenty. Smile's not necessarily the kind of movie that I want to watch over and over and over again, but I will come back for Parker Finn, because unlike a lot of studio filmmaking out there, like take some filmmakers working over at Blumhouse, where they'll take an old IP like The Exorcist or even new IP like Speak No Evil, and they'll just wreck it, and they'll just run it into the ground and make some really watered down, shitty version of it. Parker Finn is at least coming up with his own characters and his own franchises and his own stories, which leads me to my next point. I've said it before on this channel, I'll say it again. 2024 is turning into a pretty goddamn good year for the horror genre, because we have all these writer-directors now coming out of the woodwork doing like pretty goddamn good movies. We can debate which ones we like the most, but let me bring up my list real quick. This might shock and amaze you, just how many new writer-directors there are in this space delivering pretty solid films. So just in the last year, I've been impressed by the following movies. Damian McCarthy wrote and directed Oddity, which is still my favorite movie of the year. Damien Leone wrote and directed Terrifier 3, which is just a bloody, gory good time. Osgood Perkins wrote and directed Longlegs. J.T. Molnar wrote and directed Strange Darling. That's more of a thriller, but still it's kind of horror adjacent. Colin and Cameron Cairns co-wrote and co-directed Late Night with the Devil. And Robert Eggers wrote and directed Nosferatu, which is coming out in December. And apart from Nosferatu, all these movies are original creations. Even if they're franchises that are still being written and directed by the person who created it in the first place. Damien Leone directed all 3 Terrifier movies, and obviously here with Parker Finn, he directed both Smile movies. They're not like coming up with an idea, selling it off to a studio, which will then run it into the ground. They're kind of nurturing and kind of like, building their idea organically themselves. And I just think it's really exciting to have a handful, if not quite a few, really good directors now working in the horror genre that we can look forward to. That is something I did not anticipate going into 2024, but I totally welcome it. Because if you've been following this channel for any length of time, you'll know that I'm utterly bored by and disgusted by a lot of very safe, committee-driven storytelling that we see in so many big franchises, whether those are horror movies or not. But like, the Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, they got a big giant staff of writers and directors, and they all suck, and that show sucks ass, and it's once again committee-driven storytelling. I'm totally uninterested in storytelling by committee under any circumstances. Like, there are a few rare exceptions, like the movie Casablanca famously has a lot of screenwriters on it, and they just kept going through all these different drafts, but somehow it just turned into movie-making gold. I much prefer to enjoy the uncompromised, undiluted, pure vision of a single storyteller, a single writer-director, whether it's an author writing a book or a game developer making an amazing game. Obviously, you need an army to make a game, and you need an army to make a movie. But I like horror movies that have a really strong directorial voice, because once you have a bunch of chefs in the kitchen, all the little rough contours and rough edges just get shaved off, and it just makes it all feel so predictable and so boring and so unimaginative. And I feel like any giant corporation that's trusted with like a really cool idea or an idea that was cool once upon a time, almost never do they do something to improve it. Their goal is just to whip those dead horses and squeeze every last dollar out of those dead properties until people are totally disgusted with the franchise, where they never want to hear somebody mention Star Wars or Star Trek or Lord of the Rings ever again. It's like, ugh, it's like, please, like you were just like, ruining those brands and tarnishing the memories of all the great movies that came before. And the same holds true in the horror genre when you see people taking something like, Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or Halloween or whatever the case may be, something that was amazing once upon a time, and then digging it up and shocking it, trying to bring it back to life. Nearly always, like, they completely fuck it up. Like, look at Halloween Kills, one of the dumbest fucking movies ever made in human history. I much prefer to see filmmakers like the ones I just mentioned, McCarthy, Finn, Leone, Perkins, Molnar, and Cairns, as well as Eggers, just writing and directing, one filmmaker, one voice, and some of the movies are better than others, but at least they are distinctive and they feel original. And I feel like that's the best recipe for a movie having a distinctive, unique style. And obviously, every great filmmaker needs an amazing team. I did a video recently about the career of David Cronenberg. And on his best movies, he had his most frequent collaborators helping bring it to the screen, like Howard Shore wrote the score to 16 movies directed by David Cronenberg. So if you love the score to like The Fly, it didn't come out of nowhere. That's a filmmaker and a composer who worked together over and over and over again, and they brought out the best in each other. But I feel like Parker Finn and Naomi Scott, they definitely helped each other raise each other's game. Like, of all the movies that I've been mentioning this year that I really loved, I don't think I rank Smile 2 as high, or I definitely don't rank it as high as Oddity or Terrifier 3 or Longlegs or Strange Darling. Maybe it's as good as Late Night with the Devil. And Nosferatu, obviously, we'll have to wait and see in December. But I'll take a good, solid horror movie from an interesting, promising young writer-director any day. And so this leads me all to my very last point. I recently posed the question in yet another video: what is the best year for the horror genre ever in movie history? And I started doing a little digging, and there are a lot of contenders. Like, my first instinct was 1971, which turned out to be wrong. Then I was like, all right, well, what about like 1973? The Exorcist came out in 1973. And in that year, we had The Exorcist, we had The Wicker Man, and we had Don't Look Now. But then the rest of the movies were less interesting, or a lot of them I hadn't seen yet. But I found a year with, I'm not going to claim it's the best year in the history of the horror genre, but it's pretty goddamn good in terms of the depth and breadth of the competition with movies from Japan and Hong Kong and Italy and America. It's a really interesting year. So I've started working on that. It's a big one. It's a whopper, and it involves a lot of clips and a lot of editing. I will definitely have it up before Halloween, but I'm officially beginning or embarking upon my hunt for what is the greatest year in the history of the horror genre. And I'm not going to Basically, it's going to take probably 3 or 4 videos before I finally decide which of those years. But I just love this genre, and I'm happy to make as many videos on this subject as humanly possible. But I've got one final piece of praise that I want to offer for Smile 2, but it is a spoiler. So if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, bail out now, because this will definitely ruin the ending of the movie for you, or at least will will reveal the ending of the movie for you. So 3, 2, 1, last warning. If you're still with me, that means you don't mind spoilers, or you've already seen Smile 2. But what I like about Smile and what I like about Smile 2, even if I don't find the movies to be that kind of like disturbing or scary, like I said, I think they're shocking and they're thrilling, but they're not like, give me bad dreams or anything like that. But what I like about both of them is that they do not restore the status quo at the end. And I feel like far too many horror movies make the mistake of kind of venturing into the action genre where, like, the protagonist of the story pick up a shotgun or pick up a machete and they go to work and they save the day and everybody goes home with a smile on their face. That's not a horror movie. That's a different genre entirely. For me, a horror movie needs to leave the audience, upset or disturbed or shocked, or like, oh my God, that's so fucked up. And both Smile and Smile 2 do a really good job of kind of teasing the possibility that maybe it's all going to work out okay. Maybe this strong protagonist is going to prevail after all. And then they just let them fucking die and the curse continues. Like if this movie makes as much money as the first one, there are going to be 50 Smile movies made over the next 100 years. Like, even if director Parker Finn moves away from the franchise, somebody will always try to squeeze a few more bucks out of the Smile genre. But or the Smile category or franchise, whatever you want to call it. But I admire the fact that he's able to send the audience out on a bummer of an ending and still turn it into box office gold. I mean, just to remind people, Smile 1, budget of $17 million, grossed $217.4 million. I mean, Paramount doesn't have a lot of success stories to point to in recent years. That is one of them. And I think diehard fans of the horror genre, and there are legions of them out there, they respect the integrity of a bleak, nasty ending. Even if the bleak, nasty ending doesn't make any sense. Like, famously, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven had a very different idea for the very end of the movie, and they tacked on the dumbest ending in the history of movies. It's ridiculous, but at least it is kind of a bleak horror movie ending, and it leaves you wanting more and wondering what's going to happen next with Freddy Krueger and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be predictable. It has to be earned. You have to find an organic, compelling way to send the audience out kind of emotionally shattered or disgusted or disturbed. And my favorite horror ending's got to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with a girl who has survived but covered in blood, shrieking and screaming hysterically, where you know she's never going to recover. Like, that's the perfect horror movie ending. Or Night of the Living Dead, the hero of the movie. He spent the entire evening fighting zombies, and he's the only person to survive in his household, only to get shot by guys who are cleaning up zombies in the area. It's like a really phenomenal late 60s bleak horror movie ending. And in that, Parker Finn is making movies within the studio system, making movies for Paramount. I'm sure there are a few execs or a few producers who at a certain point kind of took him aside, like, hey, have you thought about that ending? Like, maybe it'd be better if she survives and goes out on like a big tour and everybody loves her and like everybody can be happy. Like, we'll make even more money. It's like, no, it'll feel like a betrayal. It'll feel inauthentic. It won't feel earned. Smile must remain true to itself. I feel like if you're making a kind of a fantasy, supernatural, psychological horror environment, once you've set up the rules in that world, you have to adhere to your own rules, and it's going to be very tough for anybody to escape the doom of this supernatural curse once it gets its hooks into them. So, Parker Finn, whatever you do next, I will be watching it. High five. I hope that Smile 2 will enjoy the success of the first one, but sometimes these wild, like, runaway successes, they're very hard to predict and they're very hard to replicate. I'm sure that Paramount's doing everything in their power to try and stack the deck in their favor, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I'll be reporting on the box office of Smile 2 in a few days' time. In any case, I look forward to hearing what people had to say about Smile 2, and I'm also looking forward to hearing what people think are like the best horror movies of this year. I haven't seen all the horror movies. I've seen a ton of them, but there are definitely a few that I've missed or that I need to circle back to before I do my top 10 of the year, because when I do my top 10 video of the year, I'm also going to have a little kind of like subcategory for my top 10 favorite horror movies of the year. Smile 2 will probably make the mix, but it's not one of my top 5. I enjoyed Smile 2, but as I've already said, I enjoyed movies like Terrifier 3 more. I enjoyed movies like Oddity more. Oddity is like kind of like the, I guess like the textbook example of the kind of horror I enjoy, where it kind of creeps up on you and slowly disturbs you as opposed to jumping out at you. Although, as I said before, I didn't mind the big jump scare from Smile 2. There's one that, like I said, is just tremendous. If my legs are locking up in agony, like with tendons balling up in my thighs, where I need like a shot of cortisone to make them unclench, that is what we are paying for when we go to see these kinds of movies. We're getting a real emotional and or physical response, and that's what people want from movies. They want a heightened sense of experience, so I'd be lying if I were to say that Smile 2 did not provide that. So let me know what you think of the movie down below. Hope everybody has a great weekend. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.